Thank you so much, Dr. Gorelick, for sharing that interesting information. I think we're going to come back to you with a few questions. And before we do that, we're going to talk to two parents. Those of you that joined us late, I wanted to let you know that there is a Q&A box that you can submit questions to for Dr. Gorelick or for Nancy and Nicole. Anybody will be happy to take your questions. If we can answer them, we will. And so you can just look for the Q&A box, put your question in there, and as soon as we get to it, we will. We kind of kept everybody muted so that nobody can verbally ask the questions, because that helps us reduce background noise for the recording that we're going to put up later. So if you would mind just submitting your questions by putting them in the Q&A box, that would be great. Okay, and I would like to start by introducing Nancy first. Nancy Foster's son, Jason, had Kawasaki disease at age 7 in 2002. She's been a volunteer for the Kawasaki Disease Foundation for 20 years, a member of the Kawasaki Disease Facebook support group for 15 years, and a group moderator for 3 years. And they live in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. And so Nancy, would you tell us a little bit about your story with Jason and the journey with Kawasaki disease?
Yes, thank you. In many ways, I think Jason's story is typical, although he was slightly older than most children when they contract Kawasaki disease. Generally, it's infants to age 5, but it does occur in older children. He was almost 8 years old, and he was initially misdiagnosed by our local pediatrician, which is a common story in 2002, but in 2023 as well. I fortunately had heard briefly of Kawasaki disease earlier in my parenting life and kept looking for information, and returned to the pediatric office a few days later when he became sicker, and he was seen by another provider who recognized Kawasaki disease and immediately sent us to Children's Hospital for treatment. Jason was very fortunate. He made a full recovery, but my experience of having to keep pursuing the diagnosis and asking questions made me want to help other parents in similar situations. So a year later, I became a parent volunteer with the Kawasaki Disease Foundation, which had been founded in Massachusetts in 2000, because there was a lot less information available online in those days. I was a moderator for a couple of their early versions of online forums. Then as times evolved and parents found it easier to access information and support groups through social media like Facebook, Nicole had already started her group, and I had joined that quite early on, and then became involved the last 3 years as a moderator. Jason went on to do speaking for the Heart Association and for various local media and all on his own, always being grateful to make a full recovery, played sports all through school, and currently runs 10, 11 miles every day, 365 days a year. And I continue reading as much and learning as much as possible, because there's always a new parent hearing that their child has a rare disease.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. Thank you for doing all your volunteer work too. I'm sure that you've helped so many parents with this disease that can be sometimes very scary when you first find out about it. And I think we'll come back to you in a little bit to see if you have any questions after we go through the questions that some of the other parents have asked us. And I'd like to, at this time, go on to Nicole and say Nicole is the mother of 23-year-old Josh, who was diagnosed with Kawasaki disease at the age of 5. They live in a small town outside of Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. Nicole established the Kawasaki disease support group on Facebook in 2005 to help spread awareness and support other families going through the same process. So, Nicole, I know that your journey with Kawasaki disease is kind of unique, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your son's, Josh's, journey with Kawasaki.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. And thanks everyone for coming today. It's really good to see so many faces and to get all the information we can from Mark. I sat with Josh at 5 years old. He was sick for about 8 days. We lived in a very small town, population 400. And our small town doctor had just gotten out of school, thankfully, because I credit that to him catching KD. Josh was originally diagnosed with an ear infection. So 8 days in, we took him back. The doctor did some looking into his books and decided that he had Kawasaki disease. We were sent to pediatrician, who immediately sent us to the hospital where Josh was treated for KD. He had a temperature of 104. He had swollen up and just was not my child. No way did that look like my son. So they started the IVIG after they did the heart tests and a bunch of blood work. Josh became very lethargic and flatlined. So I stood there for 2.5 minutes and watched as they, resuscitated my son. That is when I decided to start the KD group. Josh was 2.5 minutes flatlined. They shocked him back. And I was told at that point that the IVIG was treating him, but it was also killing him. So he unfortunately had an allergic reaction to it. So the doctor looked at me and said, what are we going to do? We have 2 choices. We can give him the IVIG, which is killing him, or we cannot give it to him and that will kill him. So our choices were slim. We were worried and ended up, what the doctor did was pumped him full of Benadryl. The Benadryl saved his life. So we were in and out of the hospital, I'm going to say, for 2 years. Josh got better. We got him home. He had severe skin issues, all sorts of the KD regular things. 2 months later, he got very ill again. We were sent back to Toronto Hospital and he was diagnosed a second time with Kawasaki disease. This, I would like to stress, is not common. So Josh was put in the medical journals because he, at that point, was one of only 2 Canadians that was ever diagnosed twice. So a lot of people feel like their child, once they have it, get it again. But Josh was actually officially diagnosed, and I always like to stress to people it's not common. It may feel like it, it looks like it, but it might not be. So 23 years old now he is, still has rheumatoid arthritis, still has a lot of skin conditions, but he's a trooper, keeps going every day. And I'm very thankful that Nancy joined my group when she did. I think she was like literally one of the first 5 people that joined my group. And she's been amazing at helping me the last few years, like really diving in the last few years, moderating. And I'm grateful to have our group and to help as many people as we can to educate them in KD.
Well, thank you so much. I think both of your stories are unique. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I heard you were working on a book. You want to tell us a little bit about the book?
Yes. So what I did was I started a book for children for Kawasaki disease. A few years ago, I started making t-shirts that had KD stuff on them, and I started making superhero capes. My mother taught me how to sew a long time ago, so I put that to work and I put the superhero in training on the back. So I was giving that to kids in the hospital that needed to feel like a superhero. But since then, I started my children's book. I just have finished the illustrations and it is now going into production. So it should be ready in about 2 to 3 weeks. And I'll make sure I put some of those on our group, and hopefully people can get them out there. It's not just for kids with KD, it's for any kid that, you know, needs to feel superpowers when they're in the hospital and overcome their fears. And I'm entitling it The Little Warriors.
What a great process and a great thing to do. And I'm sure if people want more information about that, they can look on in your Facebook group and you'll
Yes.
let them know.